And our presenter this afternoon is Charles Goldman. Charles is a RAND senior economist specializing in the economics of education, strategic planning for educational systems and organizations, and performance of schools, universities, and systems. He also holds an appointment as professor of economics at the Pardee RAND Graduate School, where he teaches policy analysis of education. One of the main research themes is measuring performance in higher education at the institution and system level. Building on that work, he develops national and international university rankings, benchmarking systems, and sits on the advisory board for the Shanghai Academic Rankings of World Universities. Prior to joining RAND, in 1993, he earned a bachelor's degree in computer science and engineering from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He has a PhD in economic analysis and policy from Stanford University and held a postdoctoral fellowship in the Stanford School of Education. I want to also invite everyone that's participating online, if you have questions during this presentation or even after this presentation, you can submit those to my email address, which is should see that on the on your screen. It was also listed on the invitation letter that was sent out on November 13th announcing this presentation. So either during this broadcast or afterwards, you're welcome to send your questions, and if we receive them before the end of this broadcast, we'll try to answer them while we're online. Otherwise, we will send you an answer by email. So with that, I'll turn it over to Charles to begin our presentation.
Thank you very much, Gary. So we are, at RAND, we are working with the Texas Higher Education Policy Institute and the Coordinating Board to conduct two projects examining how higher education meets the workforce needs in the state of Texas. The first project is specifically focusing on the potential for offering baccalaureate degrees at community colleges in Texas. It was mandated by Senate Bill 414, and the final report to the legislature is going to be due in August of 2014. The second study is a more general study of how data can be used to inform the match between higher education degree production and future workforce needs, also mandated by the legislature by House Bill 1296, and that's due February 1, 2015. The studies are motivated by a set of concerns about meeting future workforce needs. So one kind of concern is that the state may have existing programs, but they don't produce enough graduates for certain fields. Another concern is that there are certain applied fields that we think are experiencing increasing requirements for knowledge and skills, and that may call for new baccalaureate programs that haven't been previously offered in the state. So let's look at the two studies and their objectives. So the first study on the community college baccalaureates is focused on developing a process that the coordinating board can use to analyze statewide and regional workforce needs for bachelor's degrees in nursing and applied science fields, to determine the most appropriate providers of those degrees in the fields that are needed, and that if community colleges are appropriate providers, to inform the selection of which colleges should be authorized to offer those degrees. The second study focuses on a more general analysis of workforce needs and future degree planning. And so what we're doing is we're working with the coordinating board to develop a model that better estimates future workforce gaps, and then basically to try out that model by identifying some specific fields and some regions within the state where workforce needs are not being met, and then recommend how this modeling can be used to inform post-secondary policy, in particular about new degree programs or expanding degree programs. Today we're going to focus on the first study, on the community college baccalaureate study. The topic of community college baccalaureates is something that's gaining increasing attention in policy circles. And so let's start by kind of reviewing what is the current thinking. So there are, broadly speaking, if we think about baccalaureate needs that are not being met, broadly speaking, we've got three options to approach them. We could expand the capacity of state universities or potentially private four-year colleges. We could develop partnerships between universities or colleges and community colleges to offer a pathway into the four-year degree. Or we could develop baccalaureate programs at community colleges. So let's look specifically at the community college baccalaureate option, which is what the state legislature directed for this study. So we know from looking at the experiences of other states and some of the early experience with three pilot programs that the legislature previously authorized in Texas that there are a number of potential benefits for community colleges to offer baccalaureates. So first, community colleges may be a good place to expand access for students from diverse backgrounds. They typically offer flexible schedules. They're community colleges distributed throughout the states. There may be regions where universities are harder to access for students, both in terms of, let's say, commuting distance as well as financially, because community colleges typically offer much lower costs to students. Second, community colleges have a tradition and experience in applied fields of study. And so one of the arguments in favor of offering baccalaureate degrees at community colleges, particularly in applied fields, is that it represents a natural progression from existing associate or certificate programs. Third advantage is that community colleges typically have strong connections with employers and perhaps greater ability to adapt quickly to the workforce needs of their regions, maybe more so than universities and four-year colleges. On the other hand, there are concerns about offering offering bachelor's degrees at community colleges. One concern is this might represent a mission overlap, so it may be duplication of university programs, or even if the programs themselves are distinct, it might draw students away from university bachelor's degree programs and into these new community college programs. Second concern is that significant resources are required. So it's costly and takes time to develop baccalaureate programs, particularly at an institution that doesn't have experience offering four-year degrees. And in particular, the accreditors and the program content are going to require new faculty typically, and often faculty with master's and PhD degrees. And so there's concern about whether community colleges would be able to recruit enough faculty with those experience and credentials. Another concern is that perhaps offering bachelor's degrees at community colleges might divert attention and even resources away from the traditional mission of community colleges to provide open access and access to the associate's level degrees. Finally, we just want to note that we put up three options for degree providers a few slides ago, but there's really no evidence on what the impact is of the particular provider on student outcomes like persistence, graduation rates, and labor market outcomes in terms of earnings and career progression. It would be very useful to have more evidence, not only in Texas but in other states, on whether it makes a difference what kind of institution the student attends. So let's look at the national picture. So according to the Community College Baccalaureate Association, there are currently 17 states that authorize community colleges to offer baccalaureate programs. And you can see here the numerals on the map indicate the number of colleges that are actually conferring degrees, community colleges. Most of the states, although they authorize the 17 states, they don't have very many institutions that are actually doing it. Florida is the big exception, where they've made a major policy shift to take community colleges and authorize them to offer baccalaureate programs, and they've got 24 community colleges or state colleges that are doing that. Most of the programs are focused in 4 broad fields. So you can see this kind of chart here with the check marks. There are programs in nursing, in education, so there are teacher training programs in some states. There are a variety of applied science and technology, and there are some business programs, although in some states what we have marked as business is really a kind of an applied science program with some business added. So let's look at how we're thinking about the framework for the decision-making process. So this is preliminary, and we welcome your feedback on this process, and we'd be working in the project to develop it further. But for now, what we're suggesting is that we think about the decision-making process in 4 stages. So the first stage is a baccalaureate degree needed in the workforce? If so, is there already a sufficient supply? If there's not a sufficient supply, which approach is best to increase supply? And then the 4th stage would be if there's a need, if there's insufficient supply, and if community colleges represent the best approach, which community colleges should be authorized to offer that degree? Now, we would apply this framework in 2 slightly different ways, depending upon the field. So if we think, for instance, about the information technology field, there are already well-established bachelor's degree programs at state universities and at other colleges. And so there's no need to answer the first question about whether a baccalaureate degree is needed. We already know that baccalaureate degrees are in demand in information technology and computer science. So then the question, we would start with stage 2. Is there enough supply? What's the best approach? Alternatively, we might think about a field like health information or medical records technology. This is a field which traditionally has not had a 4-year degree, but there's some increasing anecdotal report that employers would like to have a higher degree of knowledge and skills in that field. So that would start us at the first stage of, is there really a demand for a bachelor's degree credential in this field? And then we would proceed through the other stages. So just illustrating these stages. So the first stage, we could think about whether certificate programs are sufficient, whether associate level programs, or whether a bachelor's degree of some kind is needed. Second stage, we would compare projections of supply and demand to try to identify fields where there's an unmet need. Third stage, looking at the best approach, again, this comes back to the 3 broad strategies for expanding supply. So it could be doing it within the universities, doing it in partnership between universities and community colleges, or developing baccalaureate programs at the community colleges. And then finally, which community colleges would involve assessment of particular community colleges' capacity to serve needs effectively in their region. So you might be aware that the coordinating board actually has 10 existing criteria for approving new degree programs. And we're showing them here on the slide. I'm going to talk about these more in the next few slides. So these criteria can inform the 4 stages of decision making. So I'm going to walk through briefly each of the 4 stages and show how we think these criteria might inform each of those stages. So in the first stage, the key question is a baccalaureate degree appropriate preparation for the workforce? So that's really going to pick up on workforce needs, what employers are telling us, and also the criterion that there be a critical mass of students. There might be some highly specialized needs that some employers would want, but perhaps it doesn't rise to the critical mass enough for the state to adopt it as a degree. Second stage is at the state level or at a regional level, is there a significant unmet need? And again, this is going to be data, both qualitative and quantitative, from employers, looking at the amount of need, and also looking at duplication. So is this new degree something which maybe is a substitute for existing programs? Then we get into the question of the best approach. Now, the best approach we kind of divide into two stages. The first is, does it make sense generally for community colleges to be providers? So, is there an unnecessary duplication or overlap with four-year institutions? Does it fit the role and mission of the community colleges? Do community colleges, are they likely to attract or have the faculty that would be necessary? And in fields like nursing, will the community colleges be able to manage the clinical placements that'll be necessary? There's a second, more specific question, which is, do community colleges have the capacity to provide programs? And this is, again, at a general level. So would community colleges be able to design the curriculum, minister the program, fund these programs, have the libraries, IT, the physical infrastructure? Once we proceed through the third stage, we would come to the fourth stage, where we would be assessing particular community colleges. So, does a specific institution have both the opportunity to target an unmet need in that region of the state and the capacity to deliver a high-quality program? And here we would use all the criteria, but we would be applying them to a particular region of the state and a particular community college. So let's look at some of the fields that we'd like to examine in this study. The legislature specified two areas of study: nursing and applied sciences. So in terms of applied sciences, for now, the coordinating board has identified a number of fields that include applied sciences and where we use as a base for the purposes of the study. So you can see them on the screen here. So fields in computer and information science, some physical science field, some science technology, some security, law enforcement, firefighting. I mentioned health information technology and the variety of fields in business that might be considered. Let's look at these a little bit more specifically. The coordinating board asked community college presidents and chancellors to nominate some fields that they'd be particularly interested in their region. And three fields kind of bubble to the top in that survey. So one is computer science and information technology. One is this medical records field. And one is a broad field which groups a number of more specific potential fields, which we're calling technical supervisors. So these are careers like, for instance, process control, which might be in the oil and gas industry, where traditionally students have earned a two-year credential, but we hear that there's demand from employers for workers to move up into supervisory positions, and they need both technical and management skills. So let's look briefly at what we already know about these fields. So in nursing, the Texas Workforce Commission is projecting a 33% growth in demand over the 2010 to 2020 period. And that's against a rough baseline of about 20% growth in the average career field. So this represents a substantial increase in demand. There have been longstanding requirements for nursing credentials at various levels, at the two-year level, at the registered nurse level, and at the bachelor's level. We hear that there are a variety of reasons why employers are increasingly looking for nurses with a four-year credential as opposed to a registered nurse credential. And we know that currently a little over half of the nurses in Texas have a four-year degree. Let's look at computer science. Computer science also projecting above average growth. There are a variety of educational requirements, and again, strong four-year degree programs already established. About 60% of computer science workers in Texas have a four-year degree. So there's a substantial portion of the labor demand that's being met by workers that don't have a four-year degree, but a substantial portion that do. Now, if we look at medical records, again, fairly high projected growth. And what we hear is that because technology is coming into this field, that there are transitions taking place. And so while currently only 18% of health information workers have a four-year degree or higher, there may be some substantial growth in employer demand in the future. The technical supervisors is a broad group, and so we're not presenting specific quantitative figures right now because this represents a range of occupations that, as I said earlier, require a kind of a combination of advanced technical skills with some management and supervisory skills. So let me end the presentation by talking about how we're going to approach this study, and then I'll open it up for questions and discussion. So as I said earlier, the project aims to develop a process that the coordinating board can use. So the first step is develop an initial decision-making framework and process, and I've just shared with you our early thinking on that in that regard. The second step is going to be to pilot test that process in 3 to 4 workforce development regions of the state of Texas and 3 to 4 fields of study. And then the third step will be, based on the pilot experiences and other information, refine that process and document the project so that the coordinating board can carry it forward. So if we look at methods specifically, we have a variety of methods in the project. We have some quantitative methods looking at workforce data and census data as well. We have interviews with employers, professional leaders, accreditors, and the post-secondary institutions. And then a review of literature, existing state experiences, and the experiences of the 3 existing programs in Texas. So if we look at the tasks a little bit more specifically, you can see we've broken down the tasks into 4. So develop a process to determine whether baccalaureate degrees are appropriate, to project gaps between supply and demand, to determine whether community colleges are the appropriate providers, and then review specific institutions for approval. And you can see how we've lined those up against our methods in the study. So we use a combination of methods to inform each of those tasks. So we would like you to be involved. We're going to send out a short survey after this webinar to everybody who has let us know that they've joined or were invited to it, and we hope you'll respond to that and provide additional input. And we're planning to convene a webinar again perhaps around February when we have completed our fieldwork in the regions and we have some preliminary findings to share with you. We'd like to get your input on those findings as we're thinking about the analysis and preparing to document and report on the project. So as Gary said at the beginning, we would like to make this as interactive as possible. I put Gary's email address up. We have a number of participants who joined us here in person, and we certainly invite you to participate. I think we have a handheld mic, Gary.
I don't have one here, but if anyone that's in the audience has a question or wants to make any comments, there's microphones at the table up front.
Okay, so we can invite colleagues to come forward and just make sure you push the button to light up. And if you'd identify yourself and your institution, we would appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. My name is Colleen Smith, and I'm from Collin College. And I think I understand all of the information that you've given us about your research, but I did have one question. I know that you interviewed college presidents and surveys to determine which programs. Is there any other type of data? And I'm going to give an example. I know that our respiratory care faculty are explaining to us what's happening in respiratory care, and I think that the trend to go towards bachelor's degree in that area, like the trend is in nursing, is happening in that field as well. And then there are some areas of the state that do not have respiratory care programs except at the community college, and then some not at all community colleges. So I just wondered if there's any other research involved in making some of those decisions, or if it is primarily all from what the presidents were saying that the needs were.
As we started at the front, this is really 2 studies that are being done simultaneously. One is strictly related to community college baccalaureate study. The other is a broader workforce study where we're to identify the workforce needs in the state and the current supply to fit those workforce needs, and the results of that study will expand the information we have about where additional baccalaureate programs are needed to meet the workforce needs of the state. So there is both the study that we have a little bit longer to produce is the one that was required by House Bill 1296, and that should give us a broader base of research data on workforce needs and what level of education is needed for those workforce needs.
Great, thank you. So it sounds to me like there may be some programs that come back into question on number one of your purpose because of what you determined in the second part of the project, which is workforce questions.
And initially, we sent out a pretty long list of programs to the presidents and chancellors to give us feedback on, and we indicated to them that in order to develop the process we're going to use, we needed to have a smaller group to start out with, but that eventually, after we get more data about the state's workforce needs, we'll be expanding our process to more fields.
To more programs. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So far, I have no questions for you.
From cyberspace?
I do have just for the broadcast, so everyone that's listening will know, as I said at the first, the recording of this broadcast will be available on our the Coordinating Board website in about 3 to 4 days, and the PowerPoint presentation will also be posted. So I think we have another question from the audience.
Yes, my name is Jeannie Harden, and I'm from
Is your button pushed? Is it lit up?
Yes.
Okay, that's better.
Do I need to start over?
Please.
Okay, I'm Jeannie Harden, and I'm from Grayson College. We're a small community college in North Texas, and we graduate over 120 nurses a year. And this may be a little preliminary because I know the studies are just starting, but I'm just really curious, wondering if, you're saying you're going to do all the workforce needs and all the things in Texas, which a lot of the much larger schools will show up in that, but wondering how that will work for small colleges that do have a big workforce in their area, but there's not as large of colleges. And I don't know if you can answer that question at this preliminary point, but how that will work out for us to be able to have opportunity to be able to probably partner in that or even offer baccalaureate programs at our college too.
Well, you might want to respond to how you're going to gather information from the different workforce workforce areas.
So thank you. Good question. So we're working with the Texas Workforce Commission data, which is broken down into the workforce development areas of the state. So we do have quantitative data in some fields. There are two different, as I mentioned in the briefing, there are two different ways of looking at fields. So that some fields already have established bachelor's degree programs, like nursing. And so the question there is not whether we should or shouldn't have bachelor's degrees. It's where we should offer them and how many. And so on those, we think we probably get pretty good insight from some of the quantitative data. In the new and emerging fields like medical records technology, we're not sure that there really is any existing quantitative survey-based data because those people haven't really been in the labor force. So we're certainly going to look where we can at the quantitative data. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to select 3 or 4 distinct regions of the state to do in-depth interviews with employers, with 4-year and 2-year institutions so that we can get a sense about the perceptions from those communities, and then we're going to make recommendations to the coordinating board about how to carry this out in the future. And we might recommend other means of gathering information that we don't actually carry out in this particular study, if we think that that would be useful in the future. But certainly the purpose of the study is really to look at the local level, because community colleges largely serve local and regional needs. And so if there's an argument to place these programs there, that argument has to be grounded in a local need.
Okay. Well, and now I'm just hoping that it'll be looked at all across, not just in the very large centers, because I know our two large hospitals there are going to, in a year they're going to say they're only going to hire baccalaureate nurses, and so our students coming out, they get jobs 100%, but they're also saying we want baccalaureate programs. So we want to provide that, and so I appreciate that. Just wanted to let you know.
And we will definitely, as we're selecting our WDA, our workforce development areas, and where we go within those workforce development areas, we really are trying to kind of make sure we touch on a broad set of colleges and areas to make sure that we can capture all the different types of cases and then be able to recommend kind of a holistic process to the THECB that will be useful for kind of these large urban areas, but also be effective for some of the smaller regions.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, any other questions? Any other comments? Well, hearing none, I appreciate everyone's attention today. And anyone up here have anything else you'd want to contribute?
I just want to say we'd really benefit from getting as many people as possible responding to our survey afterward. We've kind of asked several different questions that are related to the content of this webinar, and so getting your feedback would be hugely helpful, so please.
And I want to thank those that did send me an email confirmation, either to myself or to Sue Sutton, letting us know that you wanted to participate. We will use those email addresses to send you a survey. But we will also send the survey to the presidents and chancellors of both the community colleges, the public universities, and state colleges. The invitation went to those individuals. You'll receive a survey from us, and if you did not participate today but want to respond to the survey, we would still welcome your comments on the survey. And if you have staff in your organization that attended or watched this broadcast, please pass the survey on to them. We're not limiting the survey to one per institution. As many people that want to participate in the survey are certainly welcome to do that. And as we close, Charles's contact information is on the screen. So if you have any questions that you think of after this meeting, you could still send those questions to my email address, or you can send them directly to Charles.
Looks like you just got a few emails there.
Wait a minute. Let me see.
I'll fill some time while you. So we're going to be presenting an update on the study at the board meeting in January. You can see the date there. Mentioned we're planning a webinar maybe roughly in the February-March timeframe to update you on the preliminary study and get your input as we do our analysis. I'm actually going to send out the survey from my email address, so you'll see that coming on. And while we will share with the coordinating board analysis, we're not going to pass along us, and we will integrate that. I think Gary mentioned the webinar is going to be archived.
Right. I do have one additional question here. The first question, I think we probably have not decided on the regions for the workforce study, and so I don't have an answer for you on that. The question was, have the regions for the pilots in this study been selected already? And no, we have not identified those regions. The second part of that question is, how does the study group envision the long-range plans of universities in a particular region being considered in the study?
We will definitely be talking to the four-year community colleges about their plans and their ability to have met the needs within certain fields, and we'll take those into consideration as we develop the study, and it will likely be part of the process that we recommend to bring four-year colleges in the region into the discussion when considering a community college baccalaureate program. So they'll be very much involved in the process.
One of the things we're planning to study when we go out and talk to both the four-year and two-year institutions is to ask them about existing ways that those institutions are collaborating to provide a pathway for students who start at a community college to earn a four-year credential, because we do see that as a clear alternative to offering programs at the community colleges themselves. And so that's something, as Lindsay said, that ultimately in our recommendations, we want to make sure that the process is taking into account what the options are in a particular region and then making the most appropriate choice among those options.
Okay. I have received some comments, but no questions. So I did receive a couple of comments, and we will about how we should be looking at different types of hospitals and in different areas. And I think that would certainly be the needs of the hospitals, which is the need, which is a workforce need, will be considered as part of the study.
We would certainly welcome your emails on suggestions for aspects of the workforce or the education landscape that we should take into account as we're designing the study. So, and that's, we kind of have an open-ended question in the little questionnaire about, any other advice that you have for us.
All right. Well, thank you very much for attending this. And as I said, if you have additional questions, send them to us, and we'll get you an answer, and we'll post this information on the coordinating board website for your future use. Thank you.